Hello, hello, hello. Sorry about that, chat. Hello. Nice to see y'all. Hanging out. I've been watching you guys. Excuse me. Oh, I'm dying. How on earth do we have an offline chat? That's crazy. Hello. Hello, our secret chat. More Dayquil. I accidentally took a nighttime, what is it? Benylin? Yesterday. Oh my gosh, I wanted to have a sleep. Hello, Billy, Yasminova, hello. Riveting Rogue, how you doing? Toby, Gruffy, Dusty, Indy, Gaga, Duraxes, holy moly. So, yeah, my throat doesn't hurt, but I can still talk like this. Welcome to the Holdfast. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Hello, Death Professor, how you doing? Thank you for that. And every now and then I have to cough, but I'm trying to mute, and if I don't mute, I am so sorry. Hello, hello. Radio Holdfast. Welcome. Bard, how you doing? The sweetest people on the internet. So true. Good to see ya. Presentation time. Jet Screen, how you doing? Indy, are you ready? Lots of soup. I am so excited for soup. Simon, hello. So, as a quick update, chat, we are. What are we doing? Indy, aka Dusty Fedora, is going to be doing a presentation today, chat. I am so excited. I think it should work if I just call you. Did everybody watch Tom today? Sat, notebook out, pen in hand. Hell yeah, good idea. Let me get my notebook out before I call Indy. Tom was a menace today. Nice. Good to know. Presentation in the quiz. All right, here we go. What am I doing? Yeah, 4:30 a.m. It was a little early. To get to fully watch Tom today. Nice. Hello.
Hello.
How are
Can you hear
you?
me?
I can hear you.
I'm good. I'm good.
Amazing. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you too.
The famous Indy. Chat, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Awesome. Okay. Let me know whenever you're ready to share, and I can.
I should be ready. Let me get the. Let me get the presentation started. There we go. Share your screen. I am sharing this screen. There we go.
Oh my word. Okay, hang on. Let me.
Whoops. No, go back. There we go.
Okay, how did I do this again? I gotta figure this out. Pin. No.
Jet screen. Stop it.
Sorry. How did I do that last time? I'll figure this out. Hang on. Maybe I won't.
Entire chat is rebelling against me. I don't like it.
A flash of Hans reappears. Uh-oh. Now, how did I get it? Hang on. I'm not that stupid. Um, maybe? Help.
I don't know how it works.
How did I do this? Alexis told me, I think, last time. Hide members. I did it, chat. I did it. Sorry. I'm proud of myself. Okay. Uh, is it this one? Nope. This one. Yes. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Chat, you ready? What is happening? Simon's freaking out. Chat, be nice. Everyone, here we go. All right. Indy, take the lead. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. So this is like disclaimer. This is a 10-year-old master's thesis. Reading through it, I was spotting all the flaws as one does. So there's things that aren't really explained in depth because I already knew it fully, so I didn't think I need to explain it. So there will be points that are kind of lightly explained, but like my advisor and everyone else reading it knew what I was talking about. So there will probably be moments like that. But to get right into it, this is the title of this is "Gaze into the Fist of Dread: Visual Representations of Power, Surveillance, and Authority in Judge Dredd." I hope you guys cannot hear my dog
We,
in
a,
the
a
background.
little bit, but it's nothing. It's good.
They like scuffling. I picked that title because I do talk quite a bit about surveillance and Foucault's concept of the gaze of power. But I also picked it because then I got to make the director for the entire English department to say gaze into the fist of dread. So it was a win-win situation.
Nice.
Okay, so let's get on with it. So first, it's clicking. Move on. There we go. Table of context. This is what you'll expect for this entire presentation. So we'll start with putting Judge Dredd in context. I'll go a little broadly into what Judge Dredd is, then I'll go into what 2000 AD is, and then I'll swing by the American mainstream at the time of the initial publishing of Judge Dredd, before I then shift back to Britain at the time, and then Dredd in context of what was happening at the time, before we finally end up with explaining some of the what exactly am I talking about when it comes around like the fascist aesthetics of Judge Dredd. Like, what am I looking at? Because I'm not really looking at fascist politics. I'm looking at fascist aesthetics, the visuals of it. Then we'll move into the comic book itself, the analysis, the city the story happens in, and then Dredd himself. Then a little swip by into superheroes and like the concept of the superhero and some of the debate around the superheroes and their connections to either as a response to or as a sort of reflection of fascistic ideas and ideation. Before we move into the conclusion, which is like how is this undermining the hero concept and how is this undermining the fascist imaginary? So that's what you can expect here. Hopefully, I'll manage to get through it relatively quickly and not hang you guys up too much with this. Okay,
So
but let's
real
move
quick,
on.
quick question.
Okay, quick question.
This PowerPoint didn't exist before yesterday. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started it and finished it yesterday.
Oh my goodness. Okay, you're incredible.
Uh,
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
I am very used to working fast. That's why a lot of the slides will be kind of like on the border of walls of text. Because I want to get my main points in, but I was trying to make it visually interesting, but that mostly happens when I get into the analysis, because then I'm actually looking at panels, I'm looking at the comic, and analyzing it in pieces, essentially. But this first part will be incredibly visually boring, because it's just information.
Sweet.
All right, so let's move on. So essentially, Judge Dredd, as it is a comic book that's been released since 1977. It is still being released, and there was a brief scare in the early 2000s, but it still managed to be around. It's purchased by it was purchased by Rebellion, which is published as like Sniper Elite. They did Atomfall, so they're quite active in the creating space, and they've been trying to make a Judge Dredd show for ages, but they haven't made it yet. We'll see if that happens. Okay. Um, so essentially, the world of Judge Dredd is a post-apocalyptic dystopia,
My
and
favorite.
they constantly cycle through disaster after disaster for the sake of the readership, like to give us entertainment. So it is an irradiated world. The human population is generally isolated to a collection of cities, called mega cities in the comic. And what I'll focus on is Megacity One, which is the main city that Judge deals with. But others will show up in the comic, but this is what I'm focusing on. But Megacity One covers most of the east coast of North America. And it's both like a prison and a haven for the people after the apocalypse. So provides support, but also it kind of is the reason they're being driven insane. Um, because we've got this concept of future shock in the comic book that gives rise to the occasional futzy, as they call them, which is a citizen essentially driven mad by life in the future. So futsies come in different varieties. They can go on a murderous rampage. They can go on crime sprees, or they're just really weird, played for comedy. It's a sort of your mileage may vary on how acceptable you find those plots. Um, but essentially, the city has is marked by sort of boredom leading to crime, a lot of political demonstrations, a lot of references to police violence, and sort of in the early days, it was sort of they did very much address some of the issues, but it was kind of mild. And then in the 90s and early 2000s, they swung back into really hitting it hard. I don't know what the current conditions are because I have not kept updated on
So
Judge Dredd.
also
I am a
probably
bad fan.
probably difficult, given the real life situations happening.
True, yeah, true. But I will say, like, following Judge Dredd is way easier than following, for example, Marvel, because you're just following a singular guy.
Got it.
Um,
That's cool.
so I think it's easier than Marvel, but it still can be pretty hard because there's fucking decades of this shit. But essentially, Judge Dredd and the city is like this clash between this pop futuristic world that at the time, like they were reaching for idealistic utopia. Judge is his title. His full name is Joseph Dredd. Okay.
So his last name is actually Dread?
His last name is Dredd. That's
Cool.
his last name.
That's a cool last name.
Uh, yeah, pretty cool. But essentially, pop futurism and like the illusion of utopia meeting like the damaged psyche of a humanity in the post-apocalyptic world. So that's like the hook of the aesthetic clash, and then the hook of it is let me see. I lost my plot. I lost the plot a little bit here. Okay, so the design of the city has like bubble domes, bright colors. It hides like essentially a citizenry with a deeply damaged psyche. Managed again by a policing force that is striving for a fascist utopian vision that gets frequently undermined by the chaos of a post-apocalyptic world, and is suggested as like impossible to achieve, as one might say. I think so. So essentially, the draw in many of the Dread stories is in how the established world, like a fascist government, aggressive police, chaotic city, insane citizens, undermine like ideas of authority, power, and politics. like often reflecting on contemporary events that happen in concurrence of the comics being published. Um, so essentially, like fascist ideology is getting undermined by the satire itself of the comic. But we can sort of still have a look at how ideas of power, authority, and surveillance um, are used and then represented visually, especially when we focus on the city itself and then the titular character. So that's the scope of this. I'm looking at Dredd himself and the city.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, you may.
Thank you. How similar would this world be to like a cyberpunk world? Is
I'd
there
say there are a
like
lot
the
of
high tech stuff
similarities.
or?
Yeah, I'd say that it's like cyberpunk as a sort of thing didn't really swing into like fully known as a thing until like the 90s.
Mhm.
So Judge Dredd preceded that.
Got it.
However, I will say that yes, at this point, I would say that the world of Judge Dredd very much is aligned with cyberpunkian ideas. But because our point of view is for the most part from the policing force,
Mm.
that and again that undermines the ideas of cyberpunk because cyberpunk is like the perspective is they're the downtrodden,
Mhm.
whereas the twist to Judge Dredd world is that often we're sitting there rooting on like the fascists, even if that is in a sense like deeply uncomfortable. And that is also why, like, if you look at the stats of who reads Judge Dredd, countries that have had pasts in like fascist dictatorships, it's very low in popularity
Mm.
there. People don't generally read it because you would imagine why.
Yeah.
That's too close to home.
Got it.
Whereas in it's more covered. It's also like way more popular in English speaking countries,
Hmm.
primarily the UK and Australia and New Zealand.
Interesting.
It started picking up pace in the US, but it's still very much like not super popular. Like the giants there are mostly when it got its IDW run in like the 2010s. It picked up some popularity and started publishing collected editions in America. So popularity in America is relatively recent.
Got it. Cool.
Why are you cat wetting, Rib?
Riv.
What question do I have? What do I need to clarify?
Cool. I'm excited.
Okay, let's go on with it. Okay, where was I? Okay, so I'm looking at the design of the city, how it surrounds and frames.
Uh,
Yeah, I know, Riv. It is really like, but I think that's why the stories, like, this is why I told people earlier, don't ask me questions, you will derail me. But there's an excellent story. Like, this is my favorite Judge Dredd story ever. It's called America. And America is told from the perspective of someone in the city. I won't spoil it because it's honestly it's super fucking good. I'd highly recommend that. And in America, Dredd is like the actual villain. It's a story where he is framed as a villain, which is very rare. It happens from time to time, but I absolutely love that story. So America is like the best story to sort of illustrate how Dredd is in this position of both hero and villain in this world, which is one of the points of the presentation, so I'll revisit that. But essentially, yes, like rooting for the fascist is that the internal sort of cognitive dissonance of Judge Dredd. Um, okay, but
cool.
let's move on. Okay, so I'm looking at the city, how it frames the characters, and how it highlights the visual representations of fascist ideas and the simultaneous act of like undermining these fascist ideas through what's actually happening in the comic. So Dredd is reacting to these dynamics just as much as anyone else. So he's a visually striking figure who is the only one allowed to step beyond the boundaries set by the typical gridded layout of the comic book page. So, and additionally, um, he's a figure inspired by the superhero genre, but he's also simultaneously undermining and complicating the idea of what a superhero is and how we portray authority and power in these pieces of media, essentially. Because super, like, especially in the case of like the idea of a Superman, that's very common throughout the comics, and that is sort of a lot of scholarship around like superhero genre is like the inherent problematic nature of seeking the Ubermensch in a sense. Um, to move on, does my it does not work. Okay, I'll have to click manually next. Okay, so essentially, we're looking at fascist aesthetics and grandeur meeting futuristic insanity and grunge. So, in the sense, order not surviving the chaos, which is a tagline in the Dread film. Like, they like to think order will survive the chaos, but it won't. The man, again, is Dread, uniformed anti superhero and authoritarian. The what if. So, in a conservative world, a superhero wouldn't fight for the little guy, in essence. The scope of this is limited. I am looking at the first three case files published by Rebellion. So this is primarily relevant to the 70s and the two up until the very early 90s comics run. And the reason I stop there is that it gets really fucking complicated in the 90s. Because the like the dark and gritty thing that was picking up in like Marvel and DC also hit Dread. And the 90s period of Dread is what I often consider as kind of the low point in his stories because a lot of they're still quite fun. It depends on which one you pick, but it goes dark and gritty to the point where the satire kind of gets lost. Which is happens to Warhammer occasionally, where it gets so like into itself that the satire is very difficult to spot. And that's where it gets kind of dodgy storytelling wise. But there's still some like there's great stories like The Pit, which has like a really weird and uncomfortable romantic plot line. I won't get into it, but it's I don't like it. I don't like it. Anyway, yes, that's the scope of this. I'm gonna get on with it. I've already been talking for way too long.
No, you're good. This is great. I'm excited.
Okay.
I
Okay.
just sorry, real quick. I love
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic dystopian stuff. I love like 1984 is one of my favorite books of all time, and it's horrible and fascist and terrible. But I love I don't know why I like that kind of stuff. So this is really interesting because I've never
I
been
think
into Judge Dredd. So
yeah, and I think the dystopian the dystopia genre was in direct response to the utopian genre that came directly before it. So it was like this pushback against perfection. It was also like when we came into the post-war period where people were becoming far more like cynical and they were seeing like the results of a world war. So dystopia is in direct response to the trauma of war and the what if of like, what if we drop the nukes? What if we did that globally? What if like mutually assured destruction actually triggered and we all got fucked? That was the dystopian like question in essence. So it's very fascinating, and I think especially now it's always stayed relevant because like in essence we've never come out of that kind of state of things in the post-war period. There has been multiple wars throughout the decades. There's been multiple crises, and you had the push. Like there was an interesting, there was also a shift in focus after 9/11 as well, when terrorism came onto the main stage. So the interest of the public is very much reflective of the kind of traumas we go through just existing, and I think that. The kind of things that inspired dystopian questions never really went away, just the same where the things that inspired the utopian questions, they're still around, but they're rarer. Because, for example, Star Trek was
yeah.
in direct opposition to the idea of dystopia. It was reaching for that utopia. So you still see both of them sort of being published, but you see more, I would argue, dystopic or dystopic leaning things based on what's actually going on in the world. And there's microcosms of this also throughout the world. The countries and what the countries are experiencing informs what kind of books are being written and published there as well. So yeah, that was a tangent, but yes, that's kind of where that was like a very rough go through it. You can go deeper and look deeper into it, and someone might disagree with these, but this is like what my research was coming to when I was hip deep in all this shit. Uh, all right, let's go. So first, so 2000 AD. 2000 AD is publisher for the comic book. So 2000 AD came about in the late 70s, and it came from this anti-authoritarian desire to make sort of a mainstream underground comic, in essence. And it was also like this kind of cycle the British comic industry is stuck in, where they kept making new comics, new comics, and this sort of eternal cycle of eating its own tail because they were failing to reinvent themselves. So Judge Dredd itself was first published in the second issue of 2000 AD in 1977, and then it's been actively published ever since. So, and during this same period, like English was right in the middle of like a lot of civic unease and riots, especially around like the increasing fascist leanings in English politics at the time. So this is like was influencing the creators behind the comics, because they were all like anti-authoritarian dudes, in essence. And they were more or less dudes. There weren't any women active in this period at the time, which was disappointing when I found out. But that's how the cookie crumbles. So the comics industry, I think both in America and in Britain, but I'm focusing on Britain right now, were going through a bit of a like extreme change. They had to reinvent and rehash, because the genres that were popular were losing relevancy when it came to World War II stories. And the humor books that were hugely popular in the UK were kind of like getting repetitious and eating its own tail. So they had to start thinking up new ideas because the old ideas and the tropes were failing to draw in new readers. So the beginning of decreasing popularity, the end of the 1960s, sort of started the beginning of titles starting to fold, others merging together, and a lot of them relying on reprints rather than making new material. So, because you had essentially like they were targeting young audiences, like really young audiences. They considered comics as a let's see, what phrase did I use? Yes, essentially, they were marketing to children. So they wanted to shift towards older teen and adults as a target demographic, because those were the people who like had money, in essence. Like to just put it in very plain terms, like they were going where the money was. So 2000 AD was one among three new titles that were able to sort of buck that downward trend. And as outlined by Roger Sabin, it was a business decision to target older readership and to publish a weekly anthology to keep themselves in the public eye, sort of a strong presence on the shelves, so that people would see them and they'd get that buzz. So taking television and movie inspirations, like 2000 Nation also started taking in punk influences from the late 1970s. So they had a relevancy to their readership, and the attitudes of their readership was reflected in the attitudes of 2000 AD. So they were encouraging teens, young adults, like keen on punk, keen on anti-authoritarian youth culture. That was very much the thing at the time for the youths. Um, so they initiated those changes in the 70s, and then into the 80s, this helped revitalize some of the comic book industry.
Mm-hmm.
So tapping into multiple groups of potential readership, and not sort of clinging to that outdated idea that comics are for kids, which was killing the industry.
Yep.
So they were tapping into current movements, current ideas. They were using mature approaches to topics. So they weren't, but at the same time, they weren't alienating the kids, because they had compelling art styles.
Got
Like
it.
that pop futurism, that came as a direct result of the fact that like they still wanted to appeal to children by having bright colors, having interesting shapes, and all that. And that's interesting because you'll see as we go into the 90s and into 2000s, that pop futurism fades and we get like the gritty dark future.
Spawn.
Um,
Well, this kind of sort of reminds me of the beginning of Spawn, but not in the same, not even close to the same extent as this, but similar, where it's super dark and meant for older readers and things like that, but without the anti-authoritarian stuff and the fascist. I like
yeah,
Spawn. That's
yeah.
all. That's why.
I mean, I don't believe I've read any Spawn.
You don't have to. It just looks cool.
Looking cool is the first key of a comic book, to be
Yep.
fair. All right. Okay, so punk influence popular. And it's important to note, like, UK comics were, when they were revitalizing themselves, they were taking cues from the American underground comics. So that meant that the 2000 AD was young and fresh on the UK magazine stands because they were taking like the punk underground comic scene and putting it into the UK mainstream.
Got it.
So they were using like the Kirby-esque splash panels, dynamic rendering, and like doing everything to stand out. Um, so it was also like marketing was everything. They were marketing themselves as a magazine, not a comic book.
Oh.
And that was, it's like how they started making AI more attractive by calling it artificial intelligence rather than like large language models.
Yeah.
It's the sexy thing, make it sexy. Um, so it's reinvention of art style, storytelling, filtering through this anti-authoritarian sentiment, being a key feature to 2008 AD success, but also success for other comic book anthologies throughout the 80s. So it wasn't just 2000 AD enjoying this, and admittedly, they weren't the first ones to do it, but they were doing it. So it had success, it had popularity, but it started. This is the next slide. It started very rocky. Most of the staff did not think it would survive. Pat Mills, the first editor of 2000 AD and inventor of a lot of the really great storylines that are still going today, said like normally a successful title lasts up to 12 years. So he joked at the time that we should call it 2000 AD because it would be dead and buried by then. So it was not. They did not think they were holding a success story. To be fair, and to be fair, in the 2000s they were about to go under.
Oh,
So
wow.
yes,
Well, I think a lot of comic
um,
books were at the time, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It wasn't unique to them, but yeah, it was gonna come. So they had artisan writers taken for underground comics. So, and this was especially important because American underground comics were pushing back against the Comics Code Authority, the CCA, which had been a standard in the US since the 50s, essentially censoring what was acceptable or not acceptable in a comic book at the time. So they were using US styles, and that meant they were standing out amongst the UK comics. Yes, and in essence, they were 2000 AD was exploring new visual layouts, more varied themes. They were like they were the young and fresh thing, I think, in essence. Um, so this is like, yeah. that's the conclusion of that. But I'm getting a little lost in the source. I won't go more into this. But essentially, that's 2000 AD. Then we go on into the American mainstream. So here, like, we have the approach of the ending of the American Silver Age of comics. They were in the same situation as the UK in that they really had to start reinventing themselves, and they were in a tougher spot than the UK comics industry at the time because they had the CCA. The CCA was really hobbling what comics could do, especially the mainstream comics, and it was stopping them from appealing to like the developing audiences. And the companies like Marvel, DC, they were big enough to kind of work around the guidelines, but there was that underground building which 2000 AD directly um, took from. Um, they wanted to challenge the CCA. So the underground comics came out of the resistance to censorship. Um, Especially like drawing from ideas popular in the hippie scene, anti-war, anti-authoritarian sentiments, and again that resistance to the idea that comics were just for kids. Um, so here in underground comics, you saw adult ideas. And adult concepts were getting explored, but also increased violence in these underground comics. So these were deliberate pushbacks against the CCA. Um, and in contrast, we can see that 2000 AD, it did experience some censorship. Like the very first Judge Ed story never got published. It got published later on. But it was a little bit too dark for the time. But it was never censored to the same degree as US comics because there wasn't a CCA equivalent in the UK. So this US rebellion in comics influenced 2000 AD, and that was concurrent with what was happening in 2000 AD as well. So because, and this is the sort of idea of what was popular at the time and remixing it. 2000 AD did draw from the popular genre of superheroes. And superheroes were originally aimed at pre-adolescent audiences, even if they were using like the anxieties of World War II and the Cold War in storytelling. Um, so like, and after the 50s, like the CCA made that superhero genre like fancy turned away from reality, in order to like avoid being immoral, in essence. Uh, so that was the switch there. And now we're getting into a little rougher context. This is British politics at the time. There may be reflections on British politics today, but I want chat to keep it clean, please.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let me see. This one needs. Here we go. Judgment in Britain. Okay. So the political climate in Britain was influencing these products and the art being created. But sort of choosing a satirical fascist cop as a figurehead did come from the immediate political concerns of the time. So in this, Wagner, the Scottish creator, John Wagner, the Scottish creator of Dread, was very aware of this. He's awesome. All his takes are really funny and great. Uh, but they were very aware of what was going on. So this was sort of combining with the rise in a sort of desire to define what Englishness was. So choosing an American figure inhabiting an American world suggests additional rejection of these conservative ideas coming up in England at the time. Because we had guys like Enoch Powell, his predecessors, if we go it even further back, like Mosley and all that, sort of trying to define what Englishness was, excluding like what the actual legacy of the British Empire was, in terms of colonialism, while still railing against immigration and all that. So, but the public sentiment was that it was taking a turn towards more conservative ideas of both what Englishness was and like, the idea of immigration. Powell and others were looking for this quintessential English space and subject, um, displacing like global Englishness that came out of the British Empire's colonization. And they were looking at a definition of Englishness that was looking for biological aspects of what it is to be English. So deeply, deeply fucked up. Uh, Margaret Thatcher, everyone's favorite
Margaret
lady,
Thatcher.
Mark the sarcasm, like was talking about like defending white Britons from imminent racial swamping, which is terminology you will see reflected today. Um, but there was like a perceived problem with heavy quotation marks on the rise in the UK. So it was this sort of this fear that white British spaces would become culturally different from what they were before, like threatened by the swamping of immigration and otherness, in a sense. Um, so alongside these discussions of Englishness in the period, there were also recorded rise in crime and youth unemployment, and police response to these statistics was the aggressive targeting of black communities with stop and search tactics. And this was while the National Front were active and marking against a perceived rise in black crime. Um, so, which was, of course, like not the reality of the situation. So,
Sure.
taking into consideration the multiple violent clashes in the 1970s, like the clash between a demonstration by the National Front and a counter demonstration right by Red Lion Square in '74. We've got the Battle of Lewisham between the National Front and anti-National Front demonstrators and the police in 1977. And we have the Southall riots between the National Front and the Anti-Nazi League in '79. So this was Britain was seeing an increase in violence driven by politics and violence perpetrated by a policing force. So an article published in the aftermath of the Battle of Lewisham placed the police in opposition to the anti-fascist demonstrators. The police statement describing the counter-protest as an orchestrated and violent attempt at preventing the National Front march, as the reasoning behind the police's violent response. So that is from an article at the time in The Guardian and the BBC. So with these riots and increase in police violence in the background during 2000 AD's founding, the aspects derived from this cultural environment at the time can be really easily identified in the comic itself. Because dread came to exist at a time where police violence and conservative sentiment were on the rise, while a fascist National Front were active in inciting negative attitudes towards immigrant and non-white British citizens, and the police took to the practice of using riot gear. The first use of riot gear in Britain by the police was I lost my point. The first use was during the Battle of Lewisham, which was quite rough. Understatement, but yeah. So Wagner took the fascist sentiments championed by the National Front and used it to create the figure of Dread, satirizing and exaggerating the political climate of the time. So Dread preceded Thatcher and Thatcherism, but he was there when it arrived in the early 80s. So the quality of Thatcherism made it sort of a uniquely suited target for the satire of the comic. So the authoritarian approach, the cost-cutting, the neoliberal agenda of Thatcherism, like was pushing a growing inequality, mass unemployment, growing anti-immigrant feeling, and regular inner-city riots with anti-police sentiment. In essence, that was sort of what was going on as we move into the 80s. So Judge Dredd is evolving further as it continued to be published as a satirical response to, again, the authoritarian turn in British politics and social unrest. And you can consider it as like the comic transposing us to America to play out the futuristic drama of the complete realization of Thatcherite law and order politics, according to Gravett. So choosing America as a staging ground for Judge Dredd gave this sort of distance between Dredd and England, letting the comic have its commentary from afar and from the outside, sort of presenting an other to the English political climate at the time, and making
Sorry about that.
Jiraxis. Oh my god. Yes, you could say it was a bonus. Judge Dredd.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, Thatcher, like, Judge Dredd really took advantage of Thatcherism in the sense that it lampooned the shit out of it. uh, Essentially. But this is the heavy part of it, like the actual politics happening at the time and what was going on and the background to what the creators were going through as they were making Judge Dredd. How much time has we used?
As much as you need. We
Oh my god.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's interesting
Okay.
that like I never realized I've watched the movie of Judge Dredd. I thought it was fun. I liked the idea of the character, but I never realized how deep this went and that it was almost yeah, exactly what you're saying, but I'll add my points later. But it's really interesting so far. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like sort of it's the like art is politics in essence. Some people might not read politics in it, but behind the intent to make art and do art in order to say something, that is inherently political in that we want to get our opinion out there. It depends on the flair of it or what's going on, but I would argue even like the most inane thing out there is political because it is saying something, is communicating something. You might have to search for it a little bit. You have to like dig deep in what the original authors were looking for. But I always believe there is something to be found in the background of what's going on. Like, but you could also argue that especially now, many of our existences are inherently political, which again feeds into the art we make. That's a sidebar. We'll move on. Okay. So dread, in context. Oh yeah, I've been. I rushed. I didn't include this one. Okay, I forgot my PowerPoint slides. Anyway, here's the PowerPoint slide. Okay. Yes, this is all what I said. You just weren't looking at it because I was moving too far ahead.
All good.
Okay. Okay. So then we get into how I'm using fascism in this thesis as a point of analysis. Okay, so we go from Britain's flirting with fascism and binationalism. Um, the discussion then goes into the style and aesthetics of fascism and how that influences spaces around it. So Judge Dredd is known as a satire, but the question of how fascism is represented through the comic using the art and page layout and how these representations of fascism then serve to undermine fascist ideas. Okay, I'm getting a little lost in the source. That was a bit. I'm reading off that and I was like, that was not a good sentence. Why did I write that? Okay. So, in essence, Dredd was enticing a younger audience through the portrayal of over the top violence, while the satire added appeal for the adults. So we had a persistent popularity of superheroes at the time, and Dredd came across as a corruption of the superhero. So the sort of the what if of should a superhero what if a superhero went and sought out the urge to exert control on those they were tasked to protect, rather than to protect without any caveats. But Dredd did add a complexity that many American counterparts lacked. Dredd's status as a fascist gave the character a sort of a political stance that fascinated readers. So he functioned as like he functioned in an incredibly different system from his readers at the time, and that's why Dredd isn't popular in former countries that have had former dictatorships because they know all this shit and they don't really want to read about it. So it's that fascination of like, what if that happened to us? We can debate about what is going on right now, but I don't want to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So the type of fascism presented by Judge Dredd used the set of practices and visual cues associated with the political category rather than the formal structure we're like historically familiar with. Um, Stephen Chan, in his exploration of how control, surveillance, and architecture functions to create a sense of fascist control in Singapore, named this as the politics of vision. Both in the sense of it is a pursuit of a long-term goal and how you present yourself purely optically. Um, so the long-term ideal of an enduring nation coupled with the look of a perfect nation. So fascism itself is a utopic discourse that exerts its control on the masses through calculated construction and display of the visible, with like mass displays and monumental architecture and surveillance being like key to that. The relations of power is then intrinsic to it. It's not just the Foucauldian idea of the gaze as power, but also the sense of a constructed vision, leading us to that idea of politics as politics of vision. So it's very much like visual politics rather than actual people politics, if that makes sense. Um, the fascist goal of creating a national state carries with it the effect of the aestheticization of politics. So aestheticization of is expressed through the construction of a cultic social environment where building schemes on a like massive scale create sacred spaces where public ceremonies and rituals can be focused and performed. So this is like each time there's a huge building project and they're putting a lot of national sentiment into it. That's a red flag, by the way. Um, in Judge Dredd, some of the spaces of the city Dredd inhabits serve in this cultic role, influencing the movements of the citizens as well as those who serve as its chief authority. However, some spaces and construction undermine this sense of order and control because they're chaotic and wild rather than sensible and ordered. That's why um, a lot of the people obsessed with like ideas, fascistic ideas, talk about order, control, talk about like making things look good. That is what like fascism is in essence. They seek visual perfection as well as perfection in other things. Um, but that brings us into the city itself, Mega City 1. And now I'm moving into actually analyzing the comics. Okay, the visual of idea of visual politics, or give an example when you get a moment. Think fascist Italy. Think Mussolini's big building
Yeah.
projects. Think Franco Spain, like his big building projects. Visual politics is when you are presenting aesthetics that are showing grandeur, showing the glory of your nation. It's very much this idea of like big, big projects. Like, and I've always, there is, I can't remember the name of it, but there's this building sort of compound in Spain built by Franco and his fascists that is so, it's like a monument to the Spanish Civil War, and it is so fascinating as an example of fascist architecture because they buried those who fought against them, and they manipulated the cause of those who fought against him through building this monument. So a lot in Spain are like really fucking pissed off about people in their families buried in this fascist monument because it is a corruption of what their families fought for and what their family died for. Um, so the visual politics is how yeah, and you got it. Okay, I'll stop rambling now.
Would
So yeah,
Mussolini's headquarters be included in that?
I'd say so. Anything Mussolini built, or like,
Yeah.
because the fascists draw from the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire itself, like, is also fascistic in its ideas, and the aesthetics of fascism draw so much from the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So you get this sort of the legacy of fascistic aesthetics going from ancient Rome up until the modern era. Like, and even if you look at Washington D.C.
Hmm.
and its big building projects, those are also in essence fascist aesthetics, because it is the glorification of a space
So,
and
sorry.
the creation of a
Yeah.
cultic space.
Would a large military parade slash procession count towards that as well?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And that is like in the sense of like not like it's this is again like what I was saying, like this is purely fascist aesthetics. It's not it doesn't have to mean that the politics themselves of those using those things are fascist, but it's grounded in fascist aesthetics. So a big parade does not have to be like fascist politics, but it is related to traditions that came up through fascist ideas of aesthetics and visual politics, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Perfect.
Um, but yeah, no, a military parade is that like perfectly. And jet screen. The Galactic Empire is directly inspired by the Nazis, who were directly inspired again by
Yeah.
the fascist aesthetic. So yes, the genetics of fascist aesthetics is fed into these popular medias, and that is why anyone like I am like I know it's a charity, but I'm always super sus when it comes to the 501st, purely because of the use of the fascist aesthetics. But they do awesome stuff. They do awesome stuff. But fascist aesthetics, I've gone too deep into it to be fully comfortable with it. All right, so we've got that sidebar. Uh, so Mega City One is a character in itself. Um, so Dredd is the protagonist figure for the most part. He can be moved out of it. The role of the city that Dredd inhabits is equally as important as Dredd himself. Mega City 1 is a staging ground for the reinforcement of and the resistance against the desire for order and control in fascist authority. So the reader is presented a city in constant change and chaos, where the police force is also the de facto government with the freedom to pass immediate judgment. The city itself and those who inhabit it are present in this constant undermining force of this fascist utopia of the authoritarian justice, justice department, in which Dredd is a part. So the architecture of Megacity 1 surrounds and encapsulates the world. It's a landscape that comes to define the characters and the power structures within. It's like physically contained within this city. So the development of the city as a character starts on the visual level, from the very first sight of the comic. Let's go. Um, um, very first sight of it. And in the second issue of 2000 AD, we get a futuristic New York. This was the starting point for Megacity 1. Like the Megacity as we know it in the modern day came very much in development. So later, this turned from futuristic New York into a megacity that dwarfed and went beyond New York as they expanded the space to cover the majority of the east coast of the United States. Additionally, the first look at Megacity 1 shows an example of iconic architecture in the American consciousness that is dwarfed in comparison to the city that's around it. Um, and you also have to consider like American symbols of like exceptionalism are being dwarfed by this futuristic city ruled by a fascistic government. That is also an additional element. Um, uh, so the difference in style is also present. You've got the Empire State Building, straight lines, blocky, square, next to curving, multifaceted, futuristic megablocks, sort of that surrounds this really ancient old skyscraper. So the old world is positioned next to the new, where we have spaces that are both controlled and uncontrolled. And beneath the streets of the megacity are the remnants of the world modern readers would then find more familiar. We've got New York subway lines that come into storylines. We've got streets buried underneath massive mega blocks and intricate motorways. So the landscape of Megacity 1 goes beyond just being a geographical entity, because without it, the rest wouldn't exist. And in the comic, it involves as a setting, and it becomes a living city with a collection of like spaces and social practices that are defined by their social representations. So, the Megacity 1 is a defining feature of both the resistance against order and control, as well as a tool in which order and control is forced on its citizens, like with varying levels of success. Um, so with Megacity One's visual layers, I'm trying to. We've got the figure. I haven't gotten to the figure. This figure yet. Where my slides are disappointing. So there's this like these layers of old new resistance control, and there's a manipulation of architecture and like the failure to manipulate architecture. So we then can consider this city as possessing two faces, the figured and the disfigured. The figured city is what we can imagine and recognize, while the disfigured city is what remains hidden through the manipulation of the city. So it's like this dialectal, invisible city. The figured city is the image of the city the citizens are allowed to see, and which in the case of Megacity 1 is like a fragmented or is just as fragmented or disjointed as the disfigured city, because the disfigured city will always peek through the gaps, showing this imperfect vision of the future. um, because the vision of the figured city is becoming obscured by the architecture surrounding them, and sort of corrupting the fascist utopian city that is the ultimate goal of the fascist government. But it sort of prevents us from achieving a full view of the landscape, and it sort of hides the totality of the city. Um, Sort of the monuments and buildings designed by those in control guide the line of sight of the figured city, manipulating the idea of the city. Um, but considering what I said earlier about the old city beneath the new, for Megacity 1, this is an additional meaning as there's a literal hidden city beneath the streets. And in the comic, this hidden city is inhabited by an entirely different subset of citizens. Um, they're like, I think they come across in relatively early comic. They call themselves the Luddites. I think it's the Luddites. Maybe no, it's the troglodytes. They call themselves the
Chocolate.
Trogs. Um, uh, so you can see they were having fun there. Um, so you've got the primary space dedicated to living and everyday life, the megacity and city, megacity or city blocks are contained cities. I've mentioned mega blocks, and essentially these are cities within cities. If anyone's seen Judge Dredd, no, Dredd 2012, you know what I'm talking about. Peachtree's was one of these mega blocks, and um, it's a city within the larger city. Uh, and they some are like really awesome. Their quality of living is great. Some are no better than slums, and some are literal upper class gated communities. So these city blocks both isolate and contain the citizens, as well as give them a safe haven. If in the case of the high quality ones, so the city is functioning on a panoptic logic. Are we familiar with the panopticon?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know why.
Okay. So the panopticon, it started from a British philosopher, No, not as architect philosopher. He was like he wanted to invent the perfect prison. And it got sort of but I've read about it through the view of Foucault's ideas. So Foucault's panoptic logic, it's like the gaze of power I was mentioning earlier. So in essence, it's a sense
Oh
of
yeah.
constant surveillance.
Okay, yeah, now I
Um,
remember.
yeah, you've got this building where everyone's um, at the edges of it and inhabiting this space, but they've got no privacy because in the center there is essentially a surveillance base, whether it's cameras or people or whatever. But it's this idea of living in a space where you are always under constant surveillance. And I think in the digital world, there's some. I haven't read the modern scholarships coming out about it, but I imagine that again has further transformed the idea of the panopticon. Um, but that's the background to like when I say panoptic logic is a sense of the architecture itself is spying on you. Um, so its citizens are constantly observed by each other, by judges, by the technology they use, and what passes for authority in Megacity 1 is then controlling and trying to hide these disfigurements caused by this growing and evolving city that is still suffering from a nuclear war in the past. Because depending on the storylines, this nuclear war can be very recent or it can be further back. So it's like this trauma is still present, and even in the modern comics, like the history of no, actually, in the modern comics, they solved it by just dropping another nuke. Never mind.
Is Charlton
Um,
Heston block an actual thing in the comics? Is that's an actual panel from the comic book?
Yeah, that's an actual panel
Oh
from the
my
comic.
gosh.
They have fun with the Mega Block names by naming it after popular figures. Um, so yeah, this is an actual panel.
Amazing.
Um, okay, so that's in that. That was probably a little disjointed, but the thinking. If anyone has anyone read The City and the City from China Mieville?
Not me.
Okay. By the silence, I'm saying no.
I can't read.
You should read The City and the City. It's from the weird fiction genre.
Ooh.
It is really interesting. It sort of gives you a loop. I think when I was reading it, a lot of my fellow grad students were like, why didn't it end the way I expected? But I was like, that's awesome. I love that. I love the ending. So China Mieville's The City and the City. Read it. It's awesome. It will make you think about the cities you exist in, because we also exist in cities where we have the known city, the figured city, and the disfigured city that lives beneath it. Depending on the city, this disfigurement is more visible than others. And like disfigurement is kind of an ugly word for it. You'll understand once you read the book. But no, it's very very interesting. But anyway, so hiding these disfigurements, the design of the monumental architecture steps in. Um, so architectural giants, partly practical in the case of the mega blocks, but still surveillance centers. Um, and then partly just purely aesthetics to like display the splendor of the Justice Department. Like you should see some of the panels showing the building of the Justice Department. Just eagles everywhere. Um,
I love
uh,
looking at that now that I know that this was written by people in the UK and
mhm.
not yeah. It's so interesting.
Uh, so these architectural displays in Megacity 1. Wait a minute, I'm skipped a point. Yes. So in architecture, the design specifically to display the power of the judges, there is a move to like venerate the figure of the judge as a hero, a sort
Hmm.
of bid of mass obeisance that presents the perfect aesthetic of a fascist police force. Um, so these architectural displays are like a calculated construction of sacred spaces, as I mentioned earlier. They're hiding the disfigurements of the city behind an illusion of perfect order and control. So, and like early in the comics, we get a lot of juxtapositions of the old and new. So, I think this is the next one, next slide. Um, so we hear, so we see like we have Megacities One Statue of Justice, literally towering over the historic Statue of Liberty.
Oh, so that's a
Uh,
statue.
yeah, that's a statue. That's not a dude. That's a statue. But like you see in the panel, like it is he's dwarfing the Statue of Liberty. It is creating a visual priority. He's also in front of her. So it's that like visual importance, as in what the focus is on. Um, but it's also in the lines. I think in the later panels, it goes into it. But here, like the Statue of Liberty, she's been moved from her original location for preservation, but she's standing next to a newly erected monument built to honor the men who carry out the law in Megacity One, and where her own role in American history is neglected. So the lines like "Give him you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free," is overshadowed by the physical embodiment of the authority of the judges, which is like it's kind of a slap in the face. It's not subtle, but it gets the point across.
Wow.
So it's the prominent positioning in the Statue of Justice, hand in that sort of like hands on his hips, legs leg spread, classical heroic pose, like associating itself with like heroes like Superman, Captain America in their posing, and the sheer size placing justice above liberty visually. So this is
Interesting.
pushing old American history behind, like firmly in the past. Like putting it to the wayside, essentially. So, but also surrounding and towering over both of these statues are the mega blocks. Like they're in the background, but they still dominate the space. So the legacies of the old and new powers are crowded in by the blocks housing the millions, sort of, and the statues are just a distraction from the fragmented pieces that make up the city itself. Um, so yeah. So then this fragmented city is like simultaneously controlled but not controlled. The citizens are trapped in the center. Like they're helpless in the city of the helpless in the system of the city and the justice system, because it's designed to keep them both docile and productive. Like for Michel Foucault, next slide. The drive towards power through control can't lie in like can lie in the utilization of the body and its forces, their utility and duality, their distribution and their submission. The body as a useful force can only come into play if it is both productive as well as a subjected body. And subjected body here is in the sense of a controlled body. So, Mega City 1 is a prison to its citizens. It's one of the last livable places on the globe. This gets kind of undermined later on, but never mind. With an irradiated wasteland cutting in from the west coast on one side and like a poisoned Atlantic Ocean on the other. So, so in this case, the prison is also the last point of refuge for a surviving humanity. Sort of without the citizens, the city would be pointless. The entire existence is driven by the presence of the citizens. And the fascist utopia of the Justice Department is only present because the population left alive in the dystopian world that they feel responsible for policing. And that, and if you get into the origin comics, which also are good and gives a lot of information, that sort of underlines why they feel beholden to do this policing, why they feel a right to do the policing, because they were the police force before the apocalypse, and they're maintaining that responsibility while shifting into the space of a formerly corrupt government, and in essence also turning into a corrupt government themselves. the corrupting power of power itself,
Mm-hmm.
in essence. Um, so the judges themselves are trapped with the citizens and the pursuit for fascist utopia, like in the face of the impossibility of breaking away from the city. Um, okay. So so the city contains the citizens, the fascist and the fascist policing force, and the justice system is turning additional levels of containment as a form of punishment. So incarceration is the primary form of punishment and control that is present in the comic book. Like in the very, I'm bringing that up later. I won't go on a tangent. So punishment in the form of arrests, sentencing, like days, months, years in isolation cells, or in the comics parlance, ISO cubes. Is the most popular punishment, and there isn't like prisons where they're all crowded together. The isolation is literally the point
Oh.
of the punishment. They are purely alone. So confinement and surveillance are an active aspect of the city, because while the citizens themselves, they're not openly locked in, the city and society works in such a way where their confinement is encouraged. They're closely watched by authorities, by each other. The mega blocks, like are cities within the larger structure, but are also an isolated community where they don't have privacy. Like there's multiple stories where the starting point is the judges literally spying on a city block and seeing, like, there's one panel, the one splash page where you get a bunch of little cubes. There are apartments in these mega blocks, and you're seeing what all the people are doing in these little
Oh wow.
apartments. So like literal, like the comic communicates so clearly they do not have privacy. There is no such thing as keeping things away from the judges, um, except when they manage for plot reasons. Um, uh, so and there's this sort of dichotomy as well, like. So like a citizen can be born and spend their entire lives in these blocks, and they can die without ever having moved out. Um, but there is also a concept of welfare housing. Um, Sort of the society in the comic also provides housing from the unemployed and the idle.
Hmm.
But boredom as a result of unemployment is a plot point in a lot of issues, sort of showing off like weird fads citizens cling to in order to keep themselves active and sane. So you get this idea of confinement forced on the inhabitants and necessary from the point of view of the justice system, because without confinement they'd you'd run the risk of them running wild. You got the future shock of facing a world of the future that's hostile and chaotic. And a lot of the premise of this, a lot of the premises of a lot of the stories in Dread relies on the citizens and their reaction to the city around them. So like the reactions to the city, the people, the judges. So Dread has to solve whatever's going on in the comic through whatever means permitted. Like one story is like only 13% of the population had work.
Oh wow.
And the resulting social unrest caused in this 800 million strong population, and humans too long used to working, um, is that they couldn't adjust to the huge increase in leisure time. Which, wow, I wish
Yeah.
I wish I had all that leisure time. So sort of, but this is like satirized to the point of like this desperation of those unemployed. The storylines have like several situations where citizens forcefully take on work.
Hmm.
We've got like a group of men vandalize a robot and take over its cleaning duties. A woman knocks out her leisure counselor and takes his place. A leisure counselor is then someone advising you how to use your leisure time, I guess. Um, and like another group of men rob a bank because there was nothing else to do.
Sounds about
Um,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So this story is where we see like this is also where we see like a futzy, someone driven mad from future shock and sheer boredom. So he gets arrested and he gets sentenced to hard labor. And that guy is so thrilled because he just wanted work.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, uh, so you have this sort of story. It's outlining multiple perspective, reactions to the life of unemployment and excessive leisure. It shows like the need from a policing perspective for distraction and containment. So, and distraction shows up throughout the comic in the form of like various baffling or dangerous fads, like using a material that turns people into human pinballs to bounce around the city. That
Okay.
was eventually outlawed because it was dangerous.
Oh my goodness.
Um, it was like dangerous and illegal bike races. There was a craze to like out ugly one another,
Sure.
and like a trend of initiating block wars between opposing blocks, sparked off by like really dumb reasons, as like uh I can't remember one, but there's one literally called like block war, and the reason there is really trivial, but it's like they are so bored that they're just like, we're gonna have a war between two city blocks for the stupidest reason. That is the framing of the comic there.
Nice.
That's why like I really like I enjoy reading the comic because it's silly, it's fun, but in the moments like those you get like they're so purely just having fun with it, and then they can swing into the next story and they're actually dealing with like a deep dark story.
Mm.
So you got a little everything going on here. But in essence, the inhabitants of the city are prisoners on multiple levels. They're trapped by an arid wasteland. They're hemmed in by the ruins of the old world, and the mega blocks of the new world they exist in. They're constantly seeking distraction from that through like fads, something to engage them, and then the judges, in response, try to force order on them. So the city is detrimental to setting the scene of this push pull between the judges and the citizens. Um, so you get like monuments representing tangible symbols of fascist ideas and the power of the judges, while it's also providing the space for the citizens to rebel and resist, as the city itself is resisting order through sheer size and impossibility. And this is like setting the scene for the Justice Department and judges themselves, and like a closer look at their sort of contained visuals for representation of power, uniformity, and control, which is cues me in for the next line. Um, so that's Mega City. That's the city itself. Very very interesting. Absolutely psycho. Um, okay, how long have we been doing this, mate?
We're like, it's been like 5 minutes.
No, it's not. I've got a timer on my thing. It says 1 hour.
Yeah, it's been about an hour.
Okay, okay. Uh, okay, so I'm gonna try to rush through this a little bit. Okay.
We're
So
good.
essentially,
I got nowhere else to be. We're good.
okay, I want to take up all your streaming time fucking yapping.
It's all good. My
Okay,
I'm sick and dying anyways, so this is great.
okay, okay, nice. Okay. In the pages, the judges dominate through intimidation and like their sheer force of presence. And this is framed in the comic book pages as like figures to be feared and obeyed. Their behavior, their tactics is serving to reinforce their authority, while the visual cues are connecting the judges to colors and imagery we associate with the ideas of power and control. So, in addition, the characters are drawn and presented as authority figures, so they're prominent, they're at the forefront. But even in their position of power, the judges are uniform, a single entity that's molds together. Like they don't there's very little individuality within the judges. The power they hold comes at the cost of their individuality. Dread is the only figure, at least in the beginning, allowed to keep a sense of self in a crowd of identical faces. This will change a little as the world gets enriched and all that. There'll be some storylines that go against this, like to explore a concept. But in essence, early Dread is this. He is the primary figure allowed to keep his individuality. So the judges as a group are dominated by the ideas of justice and crime from a perspective of lawmen deeply entrenched in the fascist police state mentality. So the Justice Department is remaining a de facto institution of power in Megacity. Like, it has mayors, it has like a civilian like government, but they don't matter, and they barely get mentioned. And the judges themselves are a militarized police force who possess the authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner. So originally, sort of this was established on the premise of doing away with due process and enabling instant justice. Judges themselves go through a lifelong process of psychological conditioning in order to produce the perfect lawman for the judicial system supporting Megacity 1. So they're literally like, they're uniform down to being psychologically conditioned
So
to be uniform.
are they born and raised into this?
That's a complicated question,
Okay.
more than you think.
Okay.
Yes and no. It comes down to when you're reading the comic, and it comes down to which judges you're talking about. I think they start training. I think the traditional thing is now they start training very, very early on. And I'll revisit this later, and you'll
Okay.
get more context for this. So, but in essence, in the beginning, in the very early comics, the extent of the power is kind of vaguely defined. So the first issue states they're elected by the people to enforce the law.
Oh.
This did not stay as a thing. However, sort of their power dynamic as it evolves into the 80s turns very much into a more controlling, despotic governing body, firmly in the seat of power, while the city mostly the city is allowed to play at politics for the illusion of choice and
Got it.
autonomy. So again, the judges allow the city to quotation mark govern themselves, because otherwise you'd have even more crazies on their hands. It's essentially that. It's keeping them engaged. That is the goal of the system. So the judges are an obvious fascist force.
Mm-hmm.
They're exerting control that is like, it's at times they seem absolute, but it is like undermined through the presentation of satire and the visuals of the comic itself. Oh wow, I've got a sentence I did not finish. That's depressing to see in a final version of a master's thesis. So the obvious representation of power and control the judges hold over Omega City 1 is how they behave towards criminals and citizens throughout the pages. So policing tactics used are focused on the idea of instant judgment. So any individual judge can decide any consequences of the committed crime. So we get like 5 years for jaywalking, shit like that. So this idea of instant judgment, sort of, they don't have a lot of freedoms, the citizens. They can't argue, they can't defend themselves, unless the plot demands for it. Arguing is also punishable by law, by the way.
That sounds about accurate.
Yeah. So the excessive use of laws and law making is showing this obsessive view of order and control. So, like, they use elements like the illegality of sugar and caffeine, sort of a portrayal of an over-the-top and excessive authoritarian figure in the judge becomes comical in its absurdity. So we've got a humorous image of like 2 stone-faced judges carefully tasting white powder and grimly declaring sugar. And that the comic panel I've got up there is like that panel that deals with like contraband sugar. And back when this was written, that was satire, but now we have literal sugar taxes. So yeah,
Yeah, it's scary.
score one for the comic book, I
Yeah.
guess. So and it's but in essence, like it's pushing back against hippie culture of the American underground and pop culture in Britain. Um, through these excessive laws. Uh, so it's opposing the rejection of rules by the implementation of more rules, which is the microcosm of what's going on here, and that like you when you make things more restrictive, people buck up against that restriction, and people grow more out of control because there are more laws for them to break, and some innocuous laws and all that. So the cycle is like this vicious cycle that sort of feeds on itself.
Wow. So wait, this guy
Uh,
got 20 years for having sugar?
yep.
Okay, cool.
But it's like, us as modern readers, we're seeing punishment of like a relatively harmless offense, and the judges are like, they come across as way funnier than your average police force. Their danger being downplayed from the riot police they're inspired by because they're being so fucking ridiculous.
Hmm.
So it's a bit of that play on it. So again, like the judges, they look kind of grim. Like they've got those over the top pauldrons, which I'll get into. But and I think they draw inspiration from riot police, both in look and tactics.
Hmm.
And the social and political structure of Megacity 1 takes the layout of contemporary cities into itself. So the liberal application of mega helps it outstrip any real city. But the image it presents to us is this fictional society dominated by fear, control, and surveillance, is managing to hitting close to home for some, depending on the kind of countries we live in. And the politics of the countries we're living in. But this was particularly relevant in Britain at the time. Uh, but Dread further takes the concept to the extreme because they show extensive use of CCTV coverage. And I should note, like the UK is, I do believe, at least in the past, the UK was the country like with the most CCTV coverage. So the comic was a response to a call for more surveillance in the UK. So it was satirizing that in the sense, and we see now, like even now, it taps into like military ideas of tracking, identification, and uh, next slide. It taps into the idea of militarized tracking, identification. Like it's like this quotidian spaces and circulation of everyday life, in a sense. And here I've got a line that did not age well at all. Here's a quote from me 10 years ago. While the modern world has not fully entered the age of complete technological omniscience, it has become reality for the citizens of the fictional city of Mega City 1.
Huh.
That is a fucking lie now.
Are we in Mega City 1 now?
We're approaching it. So the author Stephen Graham notes that like the reimagining of Western attitudes towards security and military doctrine, like dramatically blurs the judicial and operational separation between policing, intelligence, and military. So driven primarily by like profiling individuals, places, behaviors, and groups, dividing them into risk factors.
Oh.
And like we do, like governments do that now, and the comic did that in the 80s. So we have now in the comic a police force given ultimate power, political power, and military power, and the policing done is heavily reliant on knowing what's going on at any given time. We get a glimpse of this in the film. The film is showing, like, it gives us the reports coming in, and we get that control panel view. But in the comics, it's even more sort of pushed in our faces. in the pages of the comics, like readers get a bird's eye view of the action, and then they imitate like a camera zooming in overhead, tracking the target through a crowd. So you get this feeling of surveillance carrying through the framing of the comic panels, panning views of the city, like showing the reader the full picture, with a judge, like in the case of the photo I've got displayed, um, is prominently displayed as in control and in pursuit. He's getting information as he goes. Um, so the representation of surveillance is the sort of it's got hasn't got any clear clues, but it comes across in the layout. So the framing. So those are the visual ideas of surveillance ongoing. The gaze of the reader gets fixed on the criminal being pursued, placing the pursuer in the dominant position of the one in control of the situation and one with authority. Um, that's later on in the comic. I don't have that panel. I should have included that panel, but I did not. Um, so yeah, but essentially the splash pages and how the framing is reinforcing that Foucauldian idea of the panoptic logic in essence. Um, yeah. Uh, okay. Now we go into something more interesting, specifically on the judges themselves. So uh, there's a fixation on authority and power, obviously. But the Justice Department are also pursuing the idea of the Übermensch in their post-apocalyptic world. They seek the fascist utopia that lies in the idea of order and control and discipline. Um, and they have to then find something that can control a world entirely consumed by chaos. Visually, they present themselves through their uniforms. Their faces are obscured, like famously Dredd. We've never seen Dredd's face.
Oh.
I think there is an argument that we saw him in one of the Cursed Earth storylines. Um, but I think there is some debate about it. But in his role as judge, we never see his face. We see other judges' faces from time to time, but Dredd, a point of Judge Dredd is we don't see his face. We only see his chin. Any film that takes off Dredd's helmet is a bad Dredd film.
I was about to say, leaves it just for some reason. Every time there's a character that never takes off their helmet, they make a movie where the character takes off the helmet, like Halo or Mandalorian or etc. etc. etc.
That is my like. I love the background in what helmets do to characters.
Yeah.
The deliberate cutting off of their personhood, the deliberate obscuring of who they are for various reasons. Like in Halo, the reason we got like initially Master Chief was supposed to be a faceless cyborg because the idea was that we could place ourselves in his shoes without getting like mixed up. No, no, I'm playing like John Halo. He's a dude, I promise. And with Dredd, the point of Dredd is not that we're placing ourselves in his shoes, not at all. For Dredd, it's more that he is like the faceless, and supposedly neutral embodiment of law and justice. In later comics, they explore this that Dredd is the lone man that is the true neutral in the world he exists in. Nobody else is true neutral. Dredd is the only true neutral. That is debatable depending on the story you're reading, and depending on your perspective on what true neutral means. No, not true neutral. Lawful neutral. That was it. Lawful neutral, not true neutral. But he is the embodiment of what lawful neutral means. All right. So faces obscured. They appear identical. Groups of judges in a crowd. So to a reader, when you see a mass of judges, they come across like a mass of clones. It's very easy to draw a lot of helmets on the page and leave it at that. You don't have to give the judges personhood. like they get individuality through the badges with their names, but that's it. It stops there, and that is for more that in some cases that's more for convenience of being to tell who does what apart.
So they all
Um,
do have individual names on their uniforms.
yes,
Okay.
yes. In stories where like we need to know who does what and like which judge has been sent where or who is Dread working with, they do get names. Uh, they do get names, but they're still faceless. A few of them get faces. A lot of them are still faceless. There is this like there's a varied way that these docile bodies, get treated in the comics, and it's quite interesting. Like the way a judge can transgress the lines of the comic is very interesting and dread above all. But I'll get to that. Um, uh, so so there's a we can if we look closer we can spot differences in the judges. Like they've got their badges, their skin color varies, and their gender varies.
So there's
Uh,
female.
oh yeah, there's female
Oh,
judges.
okay, cool.
There's always been female judges.
Okay.
I think in the early comments there's less, but there's never been this. There was never an argument of like there will be like this. It's a full male military force. That was never it. Um, One aspect you see this in Starship Troopers as
Hmm.
well with the communal showers wardrobe.
Uh huh.
The fascist idea of we are all the same.
Got it.
Our genders do not matter because we are all the same. In that sense. Gender implies individuality, and by making gender not matter, it is in that sense like the uniformity coming in. Uh, and like now, like those ideas of like shared gender bathrooms, all of that is more leaning towards progressive ideas. But like if you strip fascism to the pure like order, chaos, individuality, uniformity, that is like where it falls. Not in actual political fascism, I don't believe. They are very much keen on othering these days. Uh, okay. Where am I? I got derailed.
Sorry.
Okay, in some cases, uniformity isn't just outside. They had like ideas of cloning the perfect policing force throughout the comics history. And there is law that confirms that they did, to a certain extent, clone promising genetic material to bolster the ranks.
Oh.
So yes, the question you had earlier, some of them are literally engineered for the job they do, while some of them are trained up for the job they do.
Interesting.
So the concept of the Justice Department is a police force created to be obedient, reinforced with psychological conditioning from an early age and into adulthood, and the bodies of the judges themselves are what Foucault termed docile bodies. Those who can be subjected, used, transferred, improved. Sort of where we have the citizens of the city as subjected bodies of the condemned, the judges are the place of the soldier, recognizable and made to suit a function. The discipline that the judges value so highly produces practiced bodies, docile bodies, increasing utility and decreasing political autonomy. So with this process of dissociating power from the body, the judges become symbols more than individuals to those they're policing and to the reader. And this is again like enhanced the trappings of position. Uniforms represent a loss of autonomy, while simultaneously giving uniformity and suggesting power lies in uniformity, which is again a fascist idea. On the base level, the uniform is ornate, and it's not very practical. Large shoulder pads in gold. One's a golden eagle. It can be really massive depending on which comic you're reading. They've got bright green knee pads. They've got a giant belt buckle. and you've got that distinctive helmet that gives a good silhouette, but has terrible field of vision. So, but still, the uniform of the judges take its cues from modern policing forces and riot gear that was seen during these violent clashes I was talking about in the very beginning when I was putting context to my discussion here. So, like, we've got elements like shoulder patches and exaggerating them to having a literal eagle perched on their shoulder. Um, the utility belt is a garish green with a large eagle belt buckle. The boots are bright green with a holster. They've got a boot holster. And the helmet, like, again, riot police, it's visored and sturdy, and it's got a giant fucking badge on its forehead as well.
Yeah, very
Um,
Space Marine.
yeah, so it's like, and again, like this, and Dread like came into the public zeitgeist when Warhammer was also being made, so that
Mm.
over the top exaggeration was kind of what they were leaning on. Um, so the retro version of the Judge shows up in later storylines, and that is basically a riot helmet. So the sort of over the top one is a sort of a modern invention for the judges. So, and this sort of indicates an like encroachment of culture, fashion, and bombastic presence on the uniform design. Sort of into that more over the time development into something more grandiose as power and influence increased. And I will note in Judge Dredd in the not the Dredd is the film Dredd 2012. The uniform is kind of toned down, and that is essentially like it's closer to a riot police sort of effort. Um, and I remember when the film dropped, the comics also kind of swung towards that like having more filmic uniforms. I didn't like that. I think the overtop uniform was like a part of what made Dread. And I think they eventually did away with it. I think they're still doing like variations of the old uniform. Uh, so and here I go. Here we've got a section. Uh, I'm not on Dread yet. Let's see. Visuals. Here we go. Fascist fashion. There we go. So this sets like the eagle. I mentioned this over time, but the bird of prey. It is associated with power and strength, and it's got a historical pedigree that taps into past empires looking for control and power. So the eagle is the national bird of the United States. But the use of the eagle goes beyond just being connected to the US because of the fascist and authoritarian associations in the character. You can link it to the use of the eagle in Nazi Germany. You can link it to the use of the eagle in fascist Italy. Although I'm a little iffy on that. I'm not that familiar with specifically Italian Mussolini Italian fascist imagery, other than the fasces, which again comes from the Roman Empire and how the Roman Empire used the eagle as like legion standards, and again like the eagle in Rome, especially the standards, were deeply ritualized. Like you have the tales of legions who lost honor because they lost the
Mm.
eagle standard. You've got like stories that endure today because a Roman legion got lost along with their standard, like in modern day Scotland, or that the Eagle of the Ninth, the myth around that, but also what happened to legions in like the Tutterborg Forest and all that. So there's so much that feeds into the symbolism of the use of the eagle. Um, so like you have yes, Dread's location in America. Eagle is prominently displayed on federal seals. Um, but it links more to like the fascist use of it in like the Roman Empire and the Third Reich. Um, but if you strip the eagle down to like the pure meaning of what it is as a heraldic beast, it stands for strength and power, which appeals to ideas of control and power in a militant government. So there's a reason the eagle is quite a popular symbol. It's alongside the eagle, you've got the helmets, unique silhouettes, while simultaneously being protective gear, and adds to the look of sameness among the judges. Any distinctive features they have, their faces, are covered by the helmet. So they're only allowed to be distinguished by the badge on the badge they carry on their chest, or their chins in the case of Dredd. A running joke in the comic is that you always know which judge is Dredd because you just have to look at his chin. But they're in an essence faceless figures of authority, and they're exercising authority to impose order. So what they wear kind of removes a method of identifying the gut judges, keeping to a strict dress code that they develop for themselves, and like authority through appearance of unity defines their place among the citizens. You can easily spot them, and they're easy to fit. It's easy to fit them. So yeah, distinctive silhouette, easily identifiable, intimidating, overwhelmingly detailed. Like conveying those ideas of order and discipline a uniform like inherently has, but it is also stripping them of everything that makes them an individual. They do not have individuality in the classic sense. Okay, now we get to the interesting bit. Which is we're reaching up to 2 hours. Oh holy shit! What have you done? What have you done?
I didn't do anything. I'm just chilling, enjoying this lecture.
Okay. So, Dredd. So the evolution of Dredd follows the evolution of like a relatively unknown faceless judge to that of a full individual. So exercising authority in a manner that sort of sets itself apart from his peers. Dredd has, like, through the implication of the comic, more authority than any other judge, and that turns into a reality in the comic later on, and you'll see that there's whole storylines around it. The titular character is the central figure the reader follows for the most part. There are exceptions, but that's irrelevant for me right now. For Barker, he wrote that Dredd is only Dredd because he's the opposite of the punks on the streets, in whom we half recognize ourselves. Dredd must be both hero and villain. So Dredd's entire basis of being a stringent fascist cop is in opposition to the punk ideas running through 2000 AD and 2000 AD's readerships. His perpetual frown, his oversized chin, creates a distinctive straight man to the insanity that's constantly in the city he exists in. So he's the foil to the absurdity of Megacity 1. A sort of Dredd as a creative concept started outside of 2000 AD. He was a brainchild of John Wagner when Pat Mills was asking for characters and stories for the new anthology. He was first sort of imagined as like the Dirty Harry archetype, a violent lawman empowered to dispense justice on the spot in the future New York. That's quoted from Bishop. Carlos Esquerra was the first to draw the comic, but that story never debuted. It's that story that was a little bit too violent for the tone of the comic, so they didn't release it as the first one. So the classic comics weren't allowed to show the full brutality of Dredd. And this like tipped it away, sort of, because if they'd shown full brutality, it would have gone away from the absurdity, and it would have gone something way darker way early on. We got that darkness in the 90s, so I'm not going to complain. So the original story was far closer to police brutality that Wagner had imagined for Dredd. So it had like riots, violence happening in the 70s, so that was reflective of that. The first page introduces the character immediately. we've literally got Dredd bursting through the page towards the reader, and then uh, thick letters declaring like no one can escape justice. Um, and above him, there's 3 scenes displayed, presumably predicting the events of the robbery he is responding to, like with their grayscale coloring and fuzzy lines, kind of telling us like this is a surveillance camera tape. Here, Dredd is talking as he deals with robbers, like outlining the introductory comic role of the judges and Dredd himself, where they're stamping out crime in a city, crawling with it. He declares this as he delivers a solid kick to the face of a criminal. A block of text underneath declares like Dredd as the toughest of the judges. The panels themselves are not very uniform. They're very varied. They're dynamic. Dredd is dominating the page, and he's extending into the gutter space as he sort of metes out violence. Here, like, Judge is like the larger than life figure of like violent authority, declaring like there is no surrender. Um, and we see like the subdued bank robbers turn themselves in because there is no surrender, and they get lined up on the sidewalk and they face a firing squad execution.
Okay.
Dredd is dispassionately delivering the death sentence. Um, so this is the unreleased initial comic. This was the original idea of Dredd. He could instantly kill anyone on the street, even if they had surrendered. Um, so like, so these sort of these actual displays of violence, the violent displays are relatively tame compared to the Dredd we know later on. For example, in the film, he kicks someone out of window, and we see the impact on the ground later on, which is quite visceral. But at the time, this was deemed way too violent. Um, so the comic will eventually match this original unreleased one and then exceed it, which I do believe happened during the 90s. But even like by that time, like summary execution was seen as excessive in terms of what 2000 AD was actually looking for. The strip that replaced it had no executions, although several perps were shot. Um, but the main culprit was captured alive. So this strip kind of introduced Dredd in the same way as the first story, but had a more forgiving edge to him. So more driven by like the genuine pursuit of justice and fairness, rather than the blank robotic approach to dealing with crime in the first one. Kebby, can you knock it off, please? Okay. So then, and the same approach in paneling is used in this one. They abandoned formal grids. There's so much gutter space in this initial panel, and Dredd is again like extending outside of the confines of the panels to occupy a larger space than others. So he dominates by sheer presence. He's setting himself separate from all the characters, even his superiors, by his prominent placement on the page. So Dredd's freedom of movement enables him to go beyond the limits of the comic that the comic otherwise puts on characters around him. So he stands out visually, even in a crowd of identical judges. So he, in essence, transgresses the visual boundaries of the comic page. He places himself in a unique position of authority that other judges lack in the visual. His drawn figure crosses inked boundaries, but he also transgresses the boundary of the world of the comic itself. So he takes onto himself an additional layer of authority that isn't in... This authority isn't inherent in the Justice Department, but it's inherent in Judge Dredd himself. So a part of this is because as a judge, he can move through spaces others can't. Um, but among his fellow judges, he stands out as one permitted to toe the line and make decisions that can, in some cases, create quite significant changes. He's a leading figure among the judges, he's known on sight by citizens, and is viewed as an implacable force, both incorruptible and entirely dedicated to the Justice Department. And through this, he is allowed to become a distinct individual, despite the fact that what he works for takes great pains in enhancing uniformity. So it's like he's a he's an he's he like disagrees with the system he exists in, even if he reinforces the system he exists in a sense. Um, So he is willing to transgress borders, and this is clear in the early years in the publishing history. So we've got the Luna 1 storyline and the overarching plot of the Day the Law Died storyline, where Dredd is essentially like instating a permanent planetary governor and leading a coup in Megacity 1 respectively. um, so Dredd exercises authority through transgressing visual barriers and stretching the law as he knows it to its absolute limit. So he knows when his transgressions are hitting their absolute limit, and he creates those limits himself. Like when he thinks he's going to go too far, he stops himself. So that is why Dredd has this idea of being incorruptible. He actually stops before he goes beyond the scope of the law. But again, like to understand Dredd's position of authority, to transgress these boundaries and literally change the world around him, we need to know some background. As mentioned earlier, the Justice Department often clone their recruits as well as drawing from the population. In the story The Return of Rico, we find out that Dredd is one of 2 clones from the same donor. And later on, the identity of this donor is the founder of the entire justice system, which we know as Chief Judge Fargo. Get your laughs out on the name. Everyone laughs when I say his name.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the story A Case for Treatment. That's from 1984. Dredd, alongside his fellow judges, is a docile body to be molded, created in the image of the ideal. The source of Dredd's clone material adds like a legacy to the character that's a tangible link to Megacity 1 rather than the Justice Department. So Dredd's loyalty, in a sense, is not tied to the Justice Department, it's tied to Megacity 1 and the law of Megacity 1. So you say, like, Jaraxis, you're saying Judge Dredd still has some form of moral ethics? Yes. It is, like, it is not, you couldn't really compare him to, like, modern moral ethics. It's very much ethics viewed through the lens of the world he lives in. But Dredd will stop where other judges will bend the rules for the sake of power and authority. So Judge Dredd is, in the world he lives in, the most incorruptible force. But he is not. He is not the ultimate like ethical authority. That lies elsewhere, and that is discussed in the comic America, which I recommend to everyone. So this legacy of him being a clone of the originator of the entire system is a level of authority over the judges that surround him. His superiors defer to Dredd's judgment in some cases. He's cast in a corrupted position as a heir to a political system enveloped in chaos. And through his actions and monologues, Dredd places himself as custodian of the city itself. So this drive he has to protect the city citizens takes precedence in Dredd's approach to his position, not always protecting the system of power and control as he does it. So he, in the sense of like his interest is not in the system of power and control. His interest is in the law of Megacity 1, which is like, you could argue that's like not much, but in the world it does mean a lot. If we consider his catchphrase, "I am the law," that reinforces the idea of Dredd as an authority unto himself, an independent authority beyond the Justice Department and the judges. And on its own is like a bombastic and entirely like emblematic of the character. Is like Dredd's interest doesn't go beyond keeping the law. And this is, I'll bring up again the 90s. There is a storyline called The Pit, where there's a romantic subplot, and that romantic subplot sort of dies before it flies because Dredd is not interested in anything but serving the city. He is singularly minded in that sense. Um, uh, and so the few times Dredd is tempted with more worldly interests, romance, family, like in every story, his dedication to the law always dominates. So you could interpret this line as Dredd lacking a true sense of individuality, as by uttering the phrase, he's a figurehead of the law itself, a symbol of a concept rather than something made of flesh and blood. However, Dredd himself undermines this idea of being the physical embodiment of the law by occasionally breaking the law. Because he occasionally he does break away from the strict adherence to law and fanatical loyalty to the Justice Department. That's not obvious in the early comics. We see more rebellion coming in the later comics because they're more obvious in the later years. So like we see here, like the stories are showing how a character isn't immune to human sentiment and compromise. So they stop short of creating like a two-dimensional representative of law and authority in Dredd. They give him some sense of emotion in the sense that however corrupted or however brutal the fascist government he exists in is, Dredd himself puts the interests of the city ahead of the interests of the authority. But how he interprets the interests of the city is like an interesting thing. So it's never cut and dry. Yeah. So that's Dredd. He is the heir apparent who occasionally transgresses the authoritarian system he exists in, and does become something of a rebel. It's very, very interesting. There. Okay, now we're moving into the final section of it. Okay, how are we running on time? Do you have to be somewhere?
We've got like 20 minutes.
Okay. We'll see if I manage. Okay. So, there's parallels between Dredd and his superhero figure. But specifically how his status as a hero is undermining the core ideas of the superhero character archetype. So in the 1970s, his creation, like they worked in the American mainstream, they worked in underground comics. So Dredd owes his structure to the superhero genre. A lot of like superheroes draw from mythology. Like consider Joseph Campbell's Monomyth. Superheroes are retracing the journey of the mythical hero, and in some cases, the heroes themselves are mythical figures. Like you've got Wonder Woman from Greek myth, you've got Thor from Norse myth. But the strongest influence on superhero figures is the Judeo-Christian tradition, specifically Superman. Superman has his roots in Jewish tradition. He's drawing from the biblical figure of Samson, as well as the folkloric figure of the golem, as suggested by his strength and position as a protector. However, the key to Superman, according to Marco Ornordo, is the iconicity and flexibility of the character. Strong visual narrative, quality of seriality in Superman give him distinctive feature that can carry across from multiple authors, storylines, and eras. Like Superman himself hasn't changed much, but he has persisted in that sense because he is in essence a mythological figure. And already through this mythological association, there's a sense of power. And in the case of Thor, divine authority, but that's irrelevant right now. Sort of, we do kind of downplay that in some of the superhero storytelling, but Dredd kind of shares much of this sort of the mythology of the superhero while still allowing vulnerability in the character because he isn't invincible and he isn't divine. So a lot of superheroes Dredd is, but their power is present as inherent in themselves rather than granted by the power of the people and the Justice Department. So the perspective on superheroes as fascist figures takes the stance that the superhero sustains the ideal of the exceptional individual, imposing their own will on others and endangering democratic ideals as a result. So there is that argument that a superhero is only as conservative or fascist as the government they operate under. So likening superheroes to like policing forces, where superheroes are an ideal super police, while a heroic code of ethics is a part of fascist imaginary. But that doesn't sort of confirm a superhero as a fascist figure. Um, Superheroes confirm to the society they inhabit, which in the case of extremely powerful or nationalistic heroes like Superman or Captain America, is the idea of truth, justice, and the American way. And while the idealistic perspective that society will always treasure positive aspects on all fronts is a utopian dream that we certainly hope will hold true, many storylines play with the concept of a government failing in this way. So you've got Marvel's Ultimates, where like Captain America is he's a literal fascist in Ultimates. No one can say otherwise. So not all superheroes fit into fascistic power structures. Like we've got Marvel's Hawkeye, he relies on things like things other than strength and power to achieve his goals. While others, approaching from purely sort of physical aspects of figures, are tinged with fascist undertones. Like, yes, Superman, he spends his times off hours as the bumbling Clark Kent, is a figure of superior like power and control, where his alter ego lacks both in the sense of representing the dream of a perfect self. Captain America has his roots in the manipulation of the Third Reich idea of the Ubermensch of Aryan perfection, a scientifically created super soldier designed and trained by a government during war. So Captain America might be saved from being called a fascist by way of his personal ideals, but his point of creation was the pursuit of fascist ideal of perfection, making him the product of fascist systems and his government's pursuit of a super soldier to challenge whatever opposition may end up. Yeah. So so we do have like a code of super ethics that's sort of outlined in there, like sort of little to no violence, no killing. Like you need to be remorseful, like how you handle patriotism, and those things. So those are the ideas that kind of softens the impact of the possible fascistic interpretation of the superhero ideal. And in terms of American superheroes, there's a degree of surveillance of the government itself and skepticism towards what they may or may not be hiding from the general public. Like you think Miller's The Dark Knight Return, like novel storytelling reflection on the superhero as a problematic role model. And then we get sort of the exploration of how superheroes can be manipulated. And we've got Watchmen subverting the genre, like who watches the Watchmen, like where does the authority come from? So the lack of complications to having a superpowered being among the perfectly ordinary. So it's like superhero politics and its inadequacy given the world's problems, you might say. So you got Moore and Miller are calling for a realistic approach, whereas like commentary on politics outside of the comic book world, so like rougher and harder edged than like the kind of mythologized superhero figure. So a superhero is at the mercies of politics of whatever world they inhabit. But you have these ideas that superheroes should explore politics beyond idealism and utopia in order to reach an adult audience. Like I was talking about in the very beginning. So Dread came at a time where there was a desire to see creative media take on relevant issues. And like superheroes as pop culture stories can't cling to to perfection, despite like utopic impulses of an ideal society. So there's that fine line between utopia and dystopia that the superhero genre plays with. And then with Dread starting point rooted in the dystopia. So it's a chaotic push-pull of attempting to forcibly piece the world together. So it was a speed run of that. So essentially, we've at the conclusion here. So essentially, Dredd is the post-government takeover hero. He doesn't have the independence of the typical superheroes we see in traditional superhero media. And he is he's flexible. He can embody roles of hero or villain depending on the stories you're telling in the comic. So he's essentially like a counterpoint to what a hero should do in moments of conflict. But he's a police figure. So you would not the instinct there is to not call him a superhero, and I would argue that Dredd is not a superhero. No, I would not say he's an anti-hero, anti-villain. He's something completely. He's again like the true embodiment of lawful neutral. He is neither hero nor villain. It is the perspective of whoever is viewing him what he is. In the comic book America, he is the villain because America sees him as the villain. But if you like look without, in the terms of the law, he's just stringently pursuing what the law demands. And in some stories, he is the hero because the people he are up against are so obviously villainous. So he is both and neither all at the same time. He is lawful neutral in that sense. I hope that kind of evaluates that. It's kind of a the impossibility of Dread, but I like it. Anyway, so I'm going to skip a little bit through that. So Watchmen creates reflections of familiar superhero archetypes. Judge Dredd is taking it further. So we've got a powerful figure, inspired by extremist politics, drawing on society's reaction. The exaggerated world showcases the satire. So you're poking fun at politics, policing, and society, and how it reacts to certain stimuli. He exists in a space that facilitates his position and invites the execution of his authority, while simultaneously resisting the implementation of any concrete form of control. It's like the structure both accommodates Dread authority and the rebelling crowds. Like both of them get equal space to move. The city is visually chaotic and untamable, despite the fascistic utopia trying to be created aesthetically. The citizens of Megacity 1 are exaggerated figures of society. They're insane, they're desperate, they're hemmed in, they're in like this middle ground of old and new. And the attitude of the judges are in the belief that the city wouldn't survive without them policing it, because they're physically looming over the city. And the citizens are powerless to fight back, with mock politics to like keep them satisfied, or distractions to keep them satisfied. the presence of the Justice Department is then necessary because of the citizens, and the role of the judges vital because of the burgeoning chaos and insanity in the remains of Megacity One. But there is that sense of one cannot survive without the other. If the city hadn't been there, the judges would not be there either. There would be no need for them. Um, and similarly, without the city, there would be no Dredd. His origin relies on the starting of the dysfunctional system in a city that cannot help but grow out of its control. Megacity 1 is what gives Dredd purpose and drive, while his authority and power comes from his position within the city itself. But also, due to the development of reputation and legacy in the character, he is like a unique figure in the uniform bodies of his colleagues. Um. Okay. So the chaotic system, they won't fall in line. There's and Mega City 1 is that bulk, that hulk that barely functions, a monster with rotting innards, both hidden and on display. Like, Dredd's patriotism to his city is something that comes across as like the desperate grasp of simple survival, rather than the preservation of any particular nationalistic ideals, biological or cultural. So for Dredd, the draw is the satire and humor. The readers don't necessarily look too closely on the art of the comic, um, but they rely on the instinctual reactions to the pages, like the emulation of police gear, the framing of what's going on. The panels visually reinforces the ideas of authority and control, but they're not firmly entrenched in this sense of controls. Uh, Control can slip through their fingers. Dredd himself breaks away from the implacable representation of the law and acts as an authority unto himself. Dredd becomes an individual despite his role as a judge. He's a protagonist. Here we go. So the visual chaos of the page is rejecting ideas of uniformity and control, actively differentiating itself from the cleaner uniform lines of the judges. And in contrast, Dredd is like these fascist aesthetics, uniformity. He's a product of the system that he works for. But his link to the city, similarly, is rejecting full assimilation. The city facilitates his individuality, even as the dichotomies of order, anarchy, discipline, or disorder, and uniformity, individuality are in constant conflict. The city opposes Dredd's disciplinary figure, and Dredd in turn opposes the chaos of the city. That's the final line of what I've got.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Oh,
Holy
no,
moly.
no. The very important next step, my sources.
Yes.
I see the formatting has gotten fucked up, but we'll ignore that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I don't know if you heard, there was some clapping there for you.
Yeah, I see the chat.
Make sure you drink some water. That was incredible. And thank you for sharing that and opening our eyes to more than just like a comic book and a character or something. There's so much, it goes so much deeper.
And you can do this to any comic book.
Yeah.
It's just that I chose Judge Dredd to go completely psycho about.
Would you say that the authors or the original writers and comic book creators of Dredd were like really trying to make fun of the US by like the over eagles everywhere and just the over patriotism?
I think the visuals. I think that's debatable. I think they did consciously pick America.
Yeah.
But in considering Carlos Esquerra's connections to the Spanish Civil, he is Spanish, to the Spanish Civil War. Considering what was happening in Britain at the time,
Yeah.
I don't think America was very strongly on their mind. But they did lampoon America later on. So it definitely got if it wasn't there from the beginning, it got folded in later on.
Amazing. Can you recommend if anyone wants to look more into this or get into the comics?
Yeah, I can definitely recommend a bunch. I'm a huge fan of the retro comics. So Case Files, volume 1 and 2 and 3 are three I recommend just to leaf through it. They're quite quick reads because they're old comics, they're old style
Mm.
comics, they're nothing like the new ones. Of the new ones, I need to go through them, but there's like Origins, there's The Pit, there's America. There is also like The Day the Lord Died is an excellent one, but I do believe you get that through the case files. You know what? I'm gonna upload the PDFs I have so you guys can scroll
Amazing.
through it.
Thank you.
There is a chronological order, but it is fucking the hell to follow it.
So can we make a something maybe in the Discord that can people can find out more or look at your
Yeah,
lists and
yeah,
stuff?
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. I can make something on the Discord for that.
I had some notes. You tell me if they're right. 1977, Joe, troglodytes, uh, boredom is bad. That's my notes. I hope
Yeah,
that's good and clear.
very very good and clear. I know I
Okay,
can identify the exact moments they come from.
perfect, amazing. Thank you. Um, I guess is there any way, or do you want to advertise you in any way? People to follow you or anything like that? Like I know with Alexis we had
Uh,
the website to buy dice,
yeah.
but I don't know if
Well, yeah, I've got the Etsy. I've
yes,
got the Etsy. I can
yeah. Throw that in chat.
info design.etsy.com. I think is that going to be a link? I hope so. Okay, that's my Etsy link. I've got some stupid designs on there. That's about it. Otherwise, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Discord. I'm on Instagram, but I mostly just post about Norwegian politics there. That might not be interesting. So yeah, but that's me.
Amazing. Go support indie and buy some shirts. I bought a shirt and I love it. Actually, no, I only have one right now. I'm waiting to buy the bottle. I think I was gonna buy a bottle.
Mm.
Right? Was that what I was gonna buy? I can't remember. I had stuff in my cart. Yes, the water
Yeah,
bottle. Yeah.
yeah. No, I think the shipping goes a bit crazy from time to time. So it's like even I like when I'm ordering stuff for myself, I have to keep an eye on it.
Got it.
Um, but yes, that's what I
Awesome.
have. That's about it.
Sweet. If you guys have any questions for Indy, please, we'll have a section or something in Discord that you can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Ask me anything.
Because this goes deep, and I know there's probably other things you have this kind of, maybe not this deep of like a thesis or this all this research and stuff, but you've gone deep into other things as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. I have gone deep into other things. Yes,
Awesome. Okay. Thank
yes.
you again. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for letting me take up 2 hours and 20 minutes of your time.
Oh, anytime. Anytime. I appreciate that. And I was adding the comic books to my Amazon. I like owning the actual comic books for some of them.
Yeah,
So
same,
yeah,
same, same.
amazing. Thank you. All right. Well,
Okay.
I hope you have a great weekend, and we will talk to you later.
Yeah, everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Chat. Thank you so much for being. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Indy/Dusty, for that incredible presentation. I'm so thankful for this amazing community that has people that are so deeply passionate about things and willing to share. Because not only was that, yeah, it was 2 hours, which, like, the fact that Indy was comfortable sharing 2 hours of your day with us to share your passion just blows me away. It makes me emotional and just thankful that we have people like you in this community. Yeah, it was only like 20 minutes. But yeah, exactly. What's 2 hours? And just, I'm so thankful that we have people like you in this community that are willing to share that time with us. And yeah, thank you. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate that. So informative. It was amazing. The VOD will be up if Indy's okay with that. I'll put it up on YouTube. But yeah, please check out Discord. There will be more. We'll figure out a section or something to ask questions. I'm okay. Amazing. Thank you, Indy. I really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your time. Like, my time's whatever, but thank you for sharing your time with us and going so deep and passionate, and I love it. It's amazing. Chat, I gotta go, but I'm excited for that and to find out more and to dig deeper into Dread because it's super fun. I'm gonna watch the movie. Maybe we'll have a movie night with Dread coming up soon. I will be back December 23rd. December 23rd, I will stream there, and that'll be my last stream before Christmas, I guess. So I hope you all have an amazing weekend. The 23rd, I will be back on the 23rd. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you, and we will see you. Wait, hold on. Let me click this thing. I'm not sure if we have any credits. But yeah, have a great weekend. Thank you all. Thank you again, Indy. You're amazing. Love you all. Have a great weekend. Goodbye. Bye. Go support someone in the community. I don't know who's streaming, but go support and follow and spread the love. Thank you guys.